So, what if a story told entirely from a horse's point of view could actually spark a global movement? Well, that's exactly what happened with Anna Sewell's Black Beauty. Now, on the surface, it might look like just a children's story, but it is one of the most powerful, most effective pieces of social protest ever written. All right, let's dive into this incredible classic. And Sewell does not waste a single second. Right from the get-go, she hits us with the moral heart of the entire novel. I mean, this quote right here, it's a powerful call to action. It's basically telling us to stand up and confront injustice wherever we see it. This one idea, it's the engine that drives the whole story. And so our story begins. Black Beauty's journey starts in pretty much the best way imaginable, in a beautiful, peaceful meadow. His life is shaped right from the start by kindness and some really important lessons. You know, this advice from his mother, Duchess, it's the bedrock of his entire character. It's so much more than just a list of rules. It's a code of conduct. It's about having a sense of duty and gentleness. And that becomes his moral compass through all the tough times to come. So, from his mother's field, he gets sold to Birtwick Park under the care of a man named Squire Gordon. And you gotta understand, this place is the gold standard. This is what a horse's life should be. Here, he's not treated like property or some kind of tool. He's treated like a living, breathing creature who has feelings and deserves respect. And in the stable, he meets a couple of friends who really show us just how deeply humans can affect an animal's life. You've got Merrylegs, this super cheerful and sweet pony. And then you have Ginger. She's got this fiery temper, but you learn it's not her fault. It's a scar left by a really cruel past. Together, they're a perfect example of a simple truth. How you treat an animal is who they become. But, of course, this perfect life can't last forever. A change in Squire Gordon's life forces him to sell his horses. And this is the big turning point. Black Beauty is about to find out that the world outside of Birtwick Park is a much, much crueler place. And this slide just illustrates that fall from grace perfectly. I mean, look at the difference here. It is night and day. At Birtwick, it was all about the horse's comfort and well-being. But at his new home, Earlshaw Park, the only thing that matters is how things look. The whole philosophy shifts from kindness to pure, selfish vanity, and the consequences for the horses are just devastating. And this is the main symbol of that vanity. The bearing rein wasn't just some plot device for the book, it was a real thing. It was a status symbol in Victorian England designed to crank a horse's head up into this unnaturally elegant position. But as Sewell makes brutally clear, it was an instrument of torture. It made it hard to breathe, caused constant pain, and led to all kinds of injuries. An injury from that very bearing rein just shatters his life. He's no longer perfect enough for the rich and fashionable, so he begins this awful downward spiral. He's sold from one owner to the next, and each time, the work gets harder and the care gets worse. His whole world just dissolves into a blur of instability and exhaustion. This long descent leads him to the absolute lowest point of his life, working as a cab horse on the grueling, unforgiving streets of London. This is where he faces just relentless misery. Let's just pause on that number for a second. 12 plus hours a day. And we're not talking about a gentle trot through a park. This was pulling a heavy cab filled with people through a crowded, filthy city, day in and day out, with almost no rest. That number alone tells a story of pure exhaustion. And the conditions were just brutal. Slippery cobblestone streets where a horse could easily break a leg, loads that were way too heavy, and food that was barely enough to keep him standing. It was a daily, sensory nightmare. And you can hear the toll it took in his own words. This quote, I mean, it just shows the absolute depth of his despair. He's completely lost hope. He's at a point where death feels like the only escape from the pain. He's gone from being a beloved friend to just a disposable machine. But right when you think all hope is lost, the story takes one final, hopeful turn. When he's on the very brink of death, a little glimmer of redemption appears. We're about to move from the dark, grimy streets of London back towards the green pastures of his youth. So here's how it happens. At a horse fair, a completely broken down Black Beauty is sold for next to nothing. But the man who buys him, a farmer named Mr. Thorogood, sees something in him that's still worth saving. He gives Beauty the one thing he needs most, a rest. In a quiet pasture with good food and gentle care, he slowly, slowly starts to heal. And this sets the stage for a reunion he never could have imagined. And then we get the moment the whole story has been building towards. A young man who works for his new owners recognizes him. It's Joe Green, the little groom from his happy days back at Birtwick Park. This is the link that connects his tragic present with his happy past, and it's the thing that guarantees his final home will be a loving one. With these simple, beautiful words, Black Beauty's long, hard journey is finally over. After all the pain, all the neglect, all the suffering, he's found his way back to kindness. It is such a satisfying and emotional ending. His story has truly come full circle. But, the story doesn't really end with that last page. The most incredible part of all of this is the book's real-world impact. Black Beauty became an absolute sensation. It was a protest novel cleverly disguised as a story for kids. And guess what? It worked. It helped change actual laws, it's credited with getting the cruel bearing rein abolished, and it sparked a global conversation about animal welfare that, frankly, we're still having today. And that leaves us with this final thought. Anna Sewell gave a voice to the voiceless, and it literally changed the world. So it forces us to ask ourselves, right now, in our own time, whose suffering are we overlooking? Whose story are we ignoring? And what story, if we just took the time to listen, might have the power to change our world today?